Commander! It was open?
Just a smidge.
That crazy Niffler thing's on the loose again?
Might be.
So this is a moment that happens in the first third of the movie, and it's Eddie Redmayne playing Newt's commander, and he discovers that some of his creatures have actually escaped. This is actually a set, it's one of Stuart Craig's and Anna Pinnock's beautifully created sets. It's a tenement building in New York that we created. In fact, we built most of New York on the back lot.
This set is based on a museum in New York City, and it is in fact a completely unrestored tenement block and split into various little tiny apartments like this. It was a terrific discovery for us and enabled us to you know, get this very authentic, very poor.
Yeah, we looked at lots and lots of reference of tenement buildings to get our ideas.
The Murtlap was quite a big visual effect. We based a lot of the creatures on very real animals. We saw lots of concepts that felt very mythical and fantasy. There's a whole vernacular of creatures that are designed that feel a little bit like they all exist in movies, and we wanted our creatures to look like they could exist in the real world. And David, you'd often send me the most bizarre emails. Look at this website, look at this creature.
What we wanted to do with the animation was to make this thing as vicious and look as horrible. I mean, Paul Catlin, we came up with a design pretty quick. It was one of those creatures where actually the concept design was almost like concept design number 2. That we stuck with and we modelled up very early on and did little studies with, and then again Rodeo went on to finish it finally. But it's for the audience as well as the people in the room to think, God, that thing's absolutely just horrible and vicious, but Newt's just very kind of work a day, kind of like, oh, just go naughty, put it back in the case.
From our point of view, it was probably one of the nastiest creatures
yes.
out there, and it's had to sound horrible, feel horrible, and it looks disgusting, and it sounds and it's vicious. So you're trying to source sounds that are short, sharp, like made like monkeys and squealing pigs, and reversing them into each other with like sort of like type rubber textures, and sliding leather gloves over balloons and glue and everything, and then you're sticking all these bits together to try and make this creature that is made up of multiple different creatures into a unique but horrible sounding. It makes you jump, because it's supposed to make you jump, isn't it? The whole.
I wish we got to go do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you should.
We just do it on computers.
No, we don't.
Sounds more
We get whales in.
Mercy, Lewis, what is that?
Nothing to worry about. That is a Murtlap.
Nature does provide you with the most extraordinary foundation upon which to, nature is in some ways more remarkable than the fantastical creatures we might have come up with. But at the same time, this is a magical world and that Joe has constructed. And so as we look forward, we're both looking at how we can deepen the characters of the animals, or make them have a very distinctive personality upon which we can build. The more successful creatures, I think, in the film, like the Niffler, have a very clearly defined personality and identity, and we're looking to develop that in the coming film and films.
I think the color of Eddie's coat was my first starting point when it came to color. We talked about general color and the palette of the rooms and the period, which, when you see Catherine, you see her coat is very kind of the same values as the decor in the room around it, where Eddie's coat picks up some of the highlights of the room as opposed to the sort of muted colors. My idea with his coat was not only the room, but his friends, his fantastic beasts, and to me, they were more influenced to me in a way with his palette than the environment. So when I came to the art department, at the same time I'm seeing all the environments, I see all the colors and what the creatures are going to look like, which is a big part of Newt's character especially.
And in this case, we've got, with Glen, our sound designer, when the room's being put back together, we sort of gave the visual effects some structure in terms of building the dynamic of that, the lovely sound of the room being put together, sort of gave it an escalation and a sort of climactic audio experience for the audience.
The whole building of this, it starts and it does have a rhythm to it, doesn't it? So it has a rhythm and an energy because it's supposed to relate to her getting there, and it has a sort of like poetry and finishes on a full stop. So the sound is not just bricks, but it's also the sound of the bricks. If you listen to the bricks, they've got a nice little ring to them.
Yes.
So they're a little bit musical as well, but they are bricks, and then they have a real proper rhythm that will take over, and at the end it sort of winds up with all the word and everything. But it's done in a way so it's telling a story.
And that's the key thing of the scene is you're going to want to feel that tension of Newt's going to be caught out, and then he isn't. And then obviously the final little thing, it was nice that we came up with the final thing. I said to David, would it be nice if the picture just finally moves?
Yeah.
Which you added a little thing to, and it's just a nice little thing that the audience notices, and you kind of think, does Tina notice that? Oh no, she didn't. Oh, he's got away with it.
So this is when Eddie Redmayne brings back Dan Fogler to this magical apartment, and it's the second time we realised there's a parallel community, magical community existing in New York.
You prefer pie or strudel?
Well, this was a fantastic chance doing this set. Although there's so many visual effects, everything has to be designed, found, researched, so that it can be scanned and lit before the visual effects take over. You know, we put a lot of effort into researching the strudel, and we pulled furniture from all over the place, mainly America. We found the cabinet that the plates all fly out of is called a side-by-side, and rather an unusual piece of furniture, typically American, and it came together very charmingly, I think. I was very happy.
Queenie to me was always a character on the page, and then when we got Allison, a character that was full of light, almost transparent. So her costumes, I used materials that you could see through, materials that, like the kind of clothes that men sort of look at and wonder what's underneath, which is part of her tease and her play with Dan in this part of the story.
You prefer strudel, huh, honey? Strudel it is.
There was thoughts about whether to keep this. I mean, I was not sure at the beginning because it wasn't really pushing the narrative forward. But you were always insisting on preserving it because you felt that not only it wasn't really about the wonder, though clearly that was a big part of it, but obviously it related to Dan falling in love with Queenie and his love of baking. But also the little moment at the end with Tina and Newt, where she gives him a look, you know, come sit down, you know, Mr. Scamander. Just the point of connection between them, the tenderness, so that it was in a way pushing the narrative forward, but in a non-overt way. It was sort of a very discreet, and that's one of the things I think with visual effects. I think you've got to be careful with visual effects. You don't revel in just the visual effects. They work best when either they're thrown away and you don't linger on them, or they're there to service the development of narrative or character.
I was hoping you'd be able to tell me if there have been any sightings, tracks, that sort of thing.
You got a pretty big price on your head, Mr. Scamander. Why should I help you? Instead of turning you in.
I take it I'll have to make it worth your while.
Let's consider it a cover charge.
J.K. Rowling's script does give a lot of detailed information, particularly for set decoration. So she did cite all the magical elements, I think, in there.
Yeah.
There is a lot of detail, unusually so, that you get from the script.
The interaction with the cinematographer, Philippe Rousselot, is kind of important. Obviously, that relationship for us, and in this instance, we would have positioned the windows, positioned the practical lamps, and as you would, we're trying to anticipate Philippe's needs. But then, of course, on the set, on the day, there's a considerable amount of adjustment and reinvention.
The biggest thing really in shooting it was that none of the stuff could be there. So it's almost like rehearsing with all of the table laid and everything on the oven, and the home economist had actually cooked all the meal and the strudel, but then we had to take everything away so that then we could replace it. So even things like cupboard doors and all the crockery, everything that's on the table in the shot, was computer generated in the end. So obviously, the biggest job for us then in post was making all of that look authentic as possible, and just coming up with interesting little animations.
As the technology is developed, you really realise that the marriage, for example, of visual effects and production design and costume design and sound is so essential to the environments, for example, and the digital effects being integrated and whole. I look back at some of the earlier films I worked on, for example, and they're pretty ropey. And that's not just because of the communication, obviously that's partly the technology has changed, but also I think we've learned, and we're continuing to learn.
We always learn.
That integration is essential.